city. He is the climate program manager with the city, and he has been with the city since 2011, where he manages the climate program. His primary duties include overseeing the implementation of climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies across the city organization and community. Prior to the city of Austin, Zach spent 10 years working in the environmental consulting industry, primarily assisting large industrial clients with environmental data management, greenhouse gas inventories, and sustainability planning. And Zach holds an MBA in sustainable management from the Presidio Graduate School and undergraduate degrees in chemistry and chemical engineering from Purdue University. So welcome, Zach. And Jen Krager is joining us as well. She's the founder and principal of Terra Lumina Consulting. She has 18 years of experience designing, implementing, and evaluating programs and policies to slow the pace of climate change and improve our collective quality of life. Jen has worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors and thrives in the in-between space, connecting people and ideas in a complex network of change. She has led sustainability teams for diverse organizations, including the County of Santa Barbara, Austin Independent School District, and renewable energy provider Green Mountain Energy Company. She also was a founding member of Austin's Climate Protection Program and continues to support Austin's climate change initiatives through the development and implementation of the Austin Climate Equity Plan. Jen holds a Master's of Public Affairs from LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas in Austin, and a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Sciences and Environmental Management from the University of Virginia. So welcome, Jen. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you all.
Fantastic. I haven't presented on these meetings before, but it looks like you guys have been touching other parts of the plan. Have the other speakers given the whole story on the plan, or just parts of it? Where are we as a group here?
Yeah, every presentation, we've gone through some of the general goals for that section, and then gone in more depth in terms of what those goals mean and the background behind developing those goals, and what you guys are continuing to do to push it forward.
Okay, fantastic. Well, today I'm going to sort of give a brief story of how the whole plan was created, and then hand it off to Jen to talk specifically about the food and product consumption portion of the plan. During the whole plan creation process, Jen was working for NRDC as part of the Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge, and was working basically in our office. And so she was an integrated part of my team that worked on creating this whole climate equity plan. So she was the actual project manager of that section. So while I'll cover all of the big picture stuff, she was there for all of the details on that section. So, and she has a special passion for that section as well. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. All right, everybody see that? Yep, great. All right, so this is the cover of the new Austin Climate Equity Plan. Where we are now with the plan is any day now, the draft final version of the plan will be released and sent to City Council. And we are aiming for the September 30th City Council meeting for this plan to be adopted by City Council. So we now have the final timeline and the final steps to finally get this thing adopted. It has been a long road of stops and starts, and we're finally here, and I'm immensely happy about that. So this plan is kind of version 2.0, or like 3.0 maybe. The original climate protection resolution passed by City Council was 2007. In 2007, we worked with community members, the Office of Sustainability did in 2014 and 15 to create the document you see on the screen here. This is called the Austin Community Climate Plan. And it was trying to focus on these sections and trying to, set up strategies and actions and goals moving towards the goal of net zero emissions by 2050. So that's the goal that's been on the books, adopted by council since 2014. And this plan was on a 5-year revision cycle. So came around to 2019, and it was time to dive in and revise this plan. So we at the Office of Sustainability started working with the Joint Sustainability, which is a Joint Sustainability Committee, which is a commission that oversees our work, and then invited hundreds of stakeholders to the table to work with us to create the new version of a community-focused climate plan for the city of Austin. So obviously, this group knows this, and has been much reinforced by the recent IPCC report. Warming over 2 degrees C, could be catastrophic to life on Earth, but global emissions are not coming down yet. You'll see in a few slides, we've been successful at creating emission reductions in Austin, but globally, we're not there yet. And we're getting to a very, tenuous place where the climate has already started to change. Extreme weather is happening all around us all the time. And the intensity and the urgency and the speed at which emission reductions need to occur over the course of the next 10, 20, 30 years just continues to get ratcheted up every day, essentially. So there are two sides to the climate change coin. One is reducing emissions and reducing the causes of climate change, which we're going to focus on, which this plan is focused on. But it wouldn't go without saying that we want to avoid climate change. In Austin, that is going to mean more extreme heat, more extended periods of drought, increased risk of wildfire, and more intense rain and flooding. And those climate threats disproportionately affect low-income communities and communities of color. So we had sort of, before we started this process, we started conversations about how does equity integrate into this work. And equity during this entire process sort of became front and center because we need the solutions to work for these communities in our city, and because we need to avoid these climate catastrophes happening that are going to affect them the most. Just really quickly, as I said a minute ago, we had about 120 community members volunteer their time from these organizations and more on the screen here to participate in our steering committee and 5 advisory groups. So this was a sort of community co-creation model by which we created this plan over the course of over a year-long process. So there were about 30 city staff, and then there were all these community members. And so we were serving together jointly on advisory groups, and a steering committee was sort of overseeing the overall direction of the work. And the idea was really to harness the energy of the community and so many people in Austin that care about this issue and are smart and know what the city needs and know what's best for us, and really put them to work and collaborate on this together. So very quickly, early in the process, it became clear that we needed to center racial equity in this process, and in the process and the plan document itself. And then when we started out, we didn't really know what that meant. The city of Austin has had an equity office for about 4 years now. And we have been going through the sort of organizational process to understand racism and unpack what racial equity means in our community, and then try to figure out how do we learn from those processes and how do we center this in our work going forward to really try to get to a place where in all of the work the city does, we're trying to eliminate disparities that can be predicted by race. So the goals you see in the center here, the sort of Venn diagram, these are the sort of shared values that we created in an equity workshop at the very beginning of this process. So Much of what's included in this plan, we were trying to focus the actual strategies and the tactics in the plan on creating these benefits for everyone in Austin, and really for low-income communities and communities of color first. So next few slides are going to sort of talk about emissions, where they come from, and food and product consumption is an interesting part of that conversation. So the vast majority of the emissions when you do a direct greenhouse gas emissions inventory for our entire community, most of the emissions come from energy use in buildings and transportation. So that's natural gas used in buildings, that's all the electricity we use, and that's transportation fuels. There's some smaller other sectors there as well. But as I said on that last slide, that's just the direct geographic boundary or like production greenhouse gas inventory. It doesn't account for all of the food, all of the products, the phones, what I had for dinner. It doesn't include all of that because those, all of the emissions and fossil fuels that are being used to create everything that comes into our community isn't really captured in a geographic production inventory. So early on in this process, we used some estimation methodologies based on economic data. And we created this sort of first attempt at a consumption-based inventory. So you can see the sort of overlapping circle here. See, here's our 11.5 million metric tons as emissions that are just created in the community, like for our activities. There's about estimated a million metric tons that are associated with products and things that we export that leave the boundary. And then at the bottom, we estimate that there's about 7.5 million metric tons of emissions associated with all of the things that are imported into our community. So if you took 12.5 to 20, when you're just doing a geographic inventory, you're sort of undercounting the emissions, and you're undercounting like the overall impact of all the daily activities and everything that happens in a city. So we thought it was really important to try to address those. And that's why this section we're going to talk about later is called food and product consumption, because we're trying to not focus on like just what happens at the landfill or what gets recycled in the community. We're trying to think bigger picture about the life cycle of all the things that we buy and use on a daily basis. This is overall 2 graphs ago. If you stack all that stuff up together, this is the overall carbon footprint. We think that we sort of peaked out geographic emissions in about 2011, and emissions have been coming down, and with kind of things that are on the books are projected to sort of go down over the next few years because of Austin Energy's activities primarily. And then if we don't take further action, things would sort of just flatten out. This doesn't include like any of the projected emission reductions that would come from in this plan. So key thing about the slide though, and this is like a key takeaway on this whole planning effort, is the goal that's currently adopted by City Council is to try to get to net zero community-wide emissions by 2050. And we're proposing in this new plan, and on September 30th, we're asking City Council to adopt a new target of net zero emissions by 2040. So essentially bumping up when we're going to try to get to zero emissions by 10 years and trying to make the goal line that we're reaching for much steeper than just a straight line. So that's important. So as you guys have already heard and talked about, we focused on 5 things in the climate equity plan, 5 sections where we fully built out goals and strategies that we want to move towards. And we focused on those 5 areas because there are so many other things happening in the city organization, right? There's a zero waste plan, there's Project Connect, strategic mobility plan, there's housing plans, there's Austin Energy's plans, there's all of this other stuff. And, working in this giant bureaucracy, we can't just start setting goals for people and just start sort of overstepping our bounds into all these different departments. So we tried to focus on areas that weren't really being addressed in other things. So sustainable buildings, transportation electrification, transportation and land use, natural systems, and then food and product consumption. This is their overall, I talked about this earlier. This is sort of the org chart for how we created the plan. The Joint Sustainability Committee was sort of overseeing the whole thing. This community-led steering committee, along with climate environment leadership team, which is city directors and ACMs. And then we had these advisory groups. So each advisory group essentially met every other week for almost a year to dive into the issue, craft goals, craft strategies, and ultimately write and create the final sections that are in the final climate equity plan. Another thing really quickly, another one of our sort of equity approaches in this process was to make sure that we heard from real community members and real low-income communities and communities of color with their real stories on what they thought about climate change, what they thought about taking action on climate change, and how they were affected by it. So we recruited 13 climate ambassadors who gathered stories from their communities. They were reimbursed for their time and energy, and returned back lots of really, really useful information to our team, which we tried to integrate into the plan. So now to the details. So draft goals and strategies. So I'm not going to go through all the other sections, and we're going to sort of zero in on that food and product consumption section. Oh, really quickly. It's not included in as like new crafted goals and strategies in our plan, but it's really important to say that the Austin Energy's 2030 resource generation plan is essential for the city to reach its climate change targets. I mean, these goals that you see on the screen here are already adopted by our city council, but it's essential that Austin Energy fulfill these commitments and reach all these targets. And this is sort of like the first step to help us get there. So the summary of what's in the plan is 4 cross-cutting strategies, 17 quantitative goals, and then 74 strategies that are really the details. And really in those strategies is where like the focus on equity really comes out. These are the highest level cross-cutting strategies. So these are big picture things that we saw across all of the different advisory groups. So green jobs and entrepreneurship is obviously a huge opportunity in all parts of this plan. Prioritizing local community initiatives. So where there is already energy and already people and organizations working on things, community-based organizations, trying to work and support those as much as we can first. Regional collaboration, a challenge with this sort of plan is that this is just the city of Austin. Like this isn't the 5-county area. This isn't all the suburbs. This is our city and our boundary committing to this. So we have a lot of work to do to make that bigger impact and connect with suburban communities to make change. Then the last one is we realize that it is going to be challenging to get to absolutely zero emissions in 10 years or 20 years. So we need to be constantly thinking about how do we pull carbon out of the atmosphere and how can we support projects in our surrounding area and near us to actually get negative emissions and pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. Okay, so just really quickly, first section is sustainable buildings. I only highlighted one goal on the screen here, but the gist with sustainable buildings is we're trying to get to net zero carbon for new buildings and eventually net zero carbon for existing buildings in the community. So net zero meaning energy efficient and 100% powered by renewable on or off-site renewable energy. Transportation and land use. This is a big one, and there's 2 on transportation. Transportation is challenging in the city. The gasoline-powered car is the primary mode of how people get around the city, and that is a big challenge. So the first goal in transportation and land use, this is the section focused on how do we enable people to not have to use cars through housing, through public transportation, through access to biking and walking. So what we're trying to aim for here is by 2030, trying to get to 50% of all trips, like number of trips, are not in a single occupancy vehicle. Right now, we're at about 20%, so this is a long way to go. Transportation electrification. So we realize that we're not going to get rid of all the cars. People are going to continue to live where they're going to live. We are in a sprawled, suburban, sort of developed kind of city that isn't going to go away overnight. So Electric vehicles that are powered by renewable energy is a way to get rid of those gasoline powered vehicles. So by 2030, we're envisioning that 40% of total VMT in our community, so vehicle miles traveled, is electrified. And it's diverse culturally, geographically, economically, that it's not just high income people that can buy Teslas. Natural systems. This is a brand new section to the plan and a really important section because more and more it's, as I was saying a minute ago, it's clear that we are going to need to be enhancing all of the carbon sequestration ability of trees, of plants, of agriculture, of wildland areas around us to be able to sequester more carbon from the atmosphere. So the goal you see on the screen here is aimed at legally protecting more, 20,000 acres more of carbon pools on natural and managed lands with a focus on resilience to try to capture more and more carbon dioxide into the natural systems around us. So that brings us to section 5. So section 5 is food and product consumption. And I will let Jen take it away.
Great, thanks, Zach. Before I dive in, do anybody have any questions on kind of like the big picture, how all the pieces fit together, where we are in the process?
I think we've covered all of these sections in our past meetings, except for natural systems, which will be the next one. But I think what we haven't talked about is where we are in the process, because we know that this has been held up for so long. And so, yeah, it'd be good to get an update. You mentioned, Zach, at the end of this month, but yeah, it'd be good to understand more about that.
Yeah. So just to reiterate that, it will either be, when I say soon, when I say any day, it will either be tomorrow or it will be Tuesday that the draft final version of the plan is released. A memo to council explaining the whole thing will be released. And then we will file the request for council action at that time. At that point, it will get assigned to a council agenda. So it will get assigned to the September 30th council agenda, and it will be an item on the council agenda to adopt the new Austin Climate Equity Plan. So once those things are like set in stone and it's actually like released and it's done, I can send that information like out to this group. So you can not only see the full final version of the plan, and so you can sort of stay in the loop on that September 30th council meeting. It's going to be important for people who support this and people in the community who care about this to tell their council members that they support this and or show up or put in a public comment for that September 30th city council meeting. So that's the date to keep in mind.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think everyone on this call would be interested in getting involved and showing that support, and we'll try our best to get more AIA members to do so as well.
Fantastic.
It looks like Kristen put a question into the chat. She said Austin is quite hot. How do we account for that when it comes to increasing biking and walking within the city?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge. And I think that's why we have all sorts of different strategies focused on transportation. I mean, we realize that the distances people have to travel plus the weather is not ideal biking situations. There are, let's see, there are some sections of the plan that focus on incentives for electric bikes. Electric bikes can take some of that sweat out of the summer bike ride. And, you know, and honestly, I think we're going to have to be doing all the things, right? So some people are going to ride bikes, more people are going to ride bikes, but that's not going to be the be all end all, right? Like we're building Project Connect, which is going to have tens of thousands of daily riders on public transportation. So I think it's just one of our tools. Yeah.
I also just dropped a link in the chat to a couple different open houses, online open houses that Project Connect is hosting to kind of give you a more complete feel of what our, you know, real live transit system is going to look like as they build out the orange and the blue lines that will have a mix of above and below ground light rail and bus rapid transit. And I know you asked about biking and walking, but I will say that there is a lot of planning and design that is going into building out this massive transit and land use planning opportunity. And I'm on one of the advisory committees. And so we've been getting a sneak peek into the different concepts for the various above and below ground station plans. And they will be way, way better than the current bus stops that we have around town, that you're lucky if you get some type of canopy or shade structure. So I think that will be an improvement and make transit a lot more accessible as well.
I think Heidi makes a good point too, and that's what we'll talk about the next meeting is real big effort to add to the tree canopy in the urban center. For sure, that's going to help. But I'm in full support of those electric bikes. Make it easy. All right, Jen, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Okay, so I am going to drill down on the food and product consumption section of the plan. So really what we were trying to do with this 5-year update to the original 2015 plan was to essentially move our focus of what had previously been just looking at end of life management. So how do we keep things out of the landfill, mainly through recycling and composting. I mean, that was the big focus of the previous plan. That's been the city's resource recoveries department big focus for a long time. And over the past few years, they've been shifting that focus upstream so that we're not just looking at dealing with the trash that we already create, but how do we avoid the creation of the waste in the first place, and how do we avoid the environmental and social impacts of all of the materials that go into the products that then create waste. So this section was a little bit tricky, as I think Zach alluded to earlier. You know, I think there's kind of two things going on. One is we need to address the 2% of our community's carbon footprint that directly comes from things decomposing in the landfill. And then we also started to shift the way we think about our carbon footprint, or specifically the climate forcing impact of what we do in and around Austin. And so we're starting to shift that perspective from just looking within the geographic boundaries of Austin to taking more of like an environmental product declaration approach, an EPD approach from your world, and trying to look at the full life cycle impacts of all the goods and services that are brought into and consumed within Austin. So if we're looking at it from that larger like consumption-based emissions lens, then really you could say every section of the climate equity plan is the consumption section. But in order to kind of organize our work and put bounds around what this specific like 25-person working group was looking at, we decided to really hone in on the consumption impacts of food and the consumption impacts of mostly consumer types of products. So I know y'all have already met, I believe, with Phoebe in the sustainable building section, and hopefully you got to touch on kind of the building materials, shifting the focus from not just looking at the operating utility impacts of buildings, but really the design and material selection and end of life deconstruction of those buildings as well. That's not the focus of this plan. This is really on food and kind of consumer level products. Next slide, please, Zach. So we ended up breaking our work into kind of 3 bite-sized chunks. We had quite a few folks on our working group that have been involved in kind of regional food systems work for a long time here in Austin and Travis County. And so one of our big focus areas was food at all scales. And then another big focus area was large purchasers in the city. So places like the city and county government, the school district, the universities, the hospitals, the big corporate technology companies we have in town that have big institutional buying power. And then the third chunk was really drilling down at the kind of consumer household level and the purchasing decisions that they make. So with the food section, really trying to get at how do we encourage Austinites to choose and have access to not only climate-friendly foods, but foods that are good for our physical and mental health as well. So that really means focusing on plant-based food over animal-based food products. And we're trying to address all levels of the food consumption system. So next time when you meet with Natural Systems, they actually looked at the food production and the land management and the agriculture all the way up to the point of harvesting. And then our group took over from kind of the distribution, the retail, and the consumption and disposal of food. So we kind of chose four strategies under this overarching food-related goal. The first was having to do with, again, those large institutional food purchasers. So there's an existing program called the Good Food Purchasing Program that the city and part of UT and Austin ISD have been participating in for a number of years. It's really an all-encompassing sustainability certification program for large public food buyers. And so one of the drivers of this piece was wanting to look at the other large buyers that aren't public agencies, trying to get, again, at the kind of healthcare system and the large corporate people that have like cafeterias in their workplaces and things like that. There was also some sub-strategies in the institutional food bucket, if you will, around really building on and strengthening some of the regional food system collaboration that's been going on to promote healthy and climate-friendly foods. And then also look at, just from more of like a voluntary incentive perspective, could we develop a localized certification program, again, for those large institutional food purchasers, somewhat similar to the Austin Green Business Leaders Program, that's kind of an overarching stamp for businesses of any size, but especially with a focus on smaller, medium businesses to meet different climate and sustainability goals. So how can we apply that to the large food buyers as well? There was a second kind of sub-strategy related to retail food access and choice. And so this was including things like incentives for businesses that really shift the menu of food offerings that they have, that they shift away from meat-based products to plant-based products. It was also looking at things like there are some voluntary consumer programs. I don't know if folks have heard about Zero Food Print. It really started in California and it's expanded to our area and a few other pockets across the US. But what it does is it allows all of us, when we someday get to go out to eat regularly again, you can essentially round up your bill to donate to essentially carbon offsets with regenerative agriculture. So farmers and ranchers that are practicing kind of low-till, low-carbon practices can get funded to kind of transform their growing production practices. And then also under this retail program sub-strategy, there were concepts related to supporting community-supported agriculture, so CSAs, like food delivery from local growers, but specifically supporting farmers of color and those that are adopting regenerative agriculture practices. The third sub-strategy in this area was trying to get at all of us as individual people that have to eat and make food choices. So helping us, give us the tools to make choices for food that have a lower carbon footprint and are healthier for us. So looking at things like menu labeling systems, kind of like some jurisdictions now require calories to be included on menus, for example, or like an app or some type of guide, kind of like Seafood Watch, but for carbon. And then, providing extra support to make local produce more accessible. So for example, the Sustainable Food System for a long time has had incentives related to SNAP benefits, where they double the value of those SNAP benefits under their Double Up Food Bucks program. So that can make local produce more accessible at kind of farmers markets. And then there's a youth education and kind of school component in there as well. And then the last area under food was moving all the way downstream to waste. So we already know, Austin Resource Recovery already knows that food waste is a big problem. Compostable food and plant material makes up nearly half of our residential trash carts, or at least it did 5 years ago. And we also know that it's really a problem because a lot of our multifamily renters don't have access to compost. And so this sub-strategy was to really provide resources, encourage doing a deeper dive, a root cause analysis about why we waste so much food locally, and really improving our programming to address that issue. Any questions on the food side of things before I switch over to non-food products with the second and third goal? And next slide, please, Zach. So the second goal is trying to get at large buyers of non-food products in our community. So by 2030, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from the largest institutional, commercial, and government buyers by at least 50%. And so this one is really a lead by example set of strategies. The city of Austin has had fits and starts trying to develop a robust sustainable purchasing program for the past decade or so. And we're hoping that this update with the climate equity plan will give additional impetus and kind of teeth and resources to improve and strengthen the city's internal sustainable purchasing program. And one place that we need to start is that we don't have a great way for measuring the full life cycle carbon impact of all the different specific types of commodities and goods that the city buys. So really starting with measuring our baseline so that we can set specific reduction goals from that, and we can track progress towards this 50% reduction goal. And then, like I said, just kind of start measuring our impact and then identifying the specific commodity types that have the biggest impact and developing purchasing standards around those and developing training for buyers across all the city departments because it's a highly decentralized process. And then also education and training for vendors so that they can provide the products that the city has been asking for. And then there's an opportunity once, the city's purchasing program is kind of the standard, working with other businesses and organizations of all sizes across our community to follow the city's lead. And here, specifically trying to get at least half of the local large buyers. So that's organizations with 2,500 or more employees is the way we're going to try to measure that. And then also get another 2,500 of any type of organization of any size to all work together to create and adopt a set of sustainable purchasing standards and guidelines, and really prioritizing historically underutilized businesses and organizations that either employ or are led by people of color to try to give them supports to be able to participate in that. And then the last piece is expanding the city's circular economy program. So for a number of years now, the city has had an interdepartmental program that shares a budget and staff between Austin Resource Recovery, which is the city's waste department, and the city's economic development department, so that they're trying to attract and support businesses that practice circularity. So they're moving away from that linear kind of extraction, production, and throwing away very short-term products and trying to close that loop and making it circular thinking. So the ideas under the circular economy program are to really, again, focus on that lead by example model, encouraging all city departments and to kind of share resources rather than just to independently buy to meet their own internal departmental needs, but to actually look holistically across the city organization to share, to reuse, to adopt kind of circular economy procurement models. So things like product as a service or leasing rather than buying products, and ensuring that there's a product take back requirement. That happens a lot in technology, but kind of expanding that out to other product types. There were some ideas here around supporting kind of startup circular businesses by providing incubation space, funding, technical assistance. And then there's also, again, a strong youth component here to provide kind of education, internship, and apprenticeship programs that really support repair and reuse businesses and thinking. Any questions on kind of those big purchasers before we switch to the household level?
I'm just wondering, Jen, how we get the private sector and the firms we work at to follow the same principles that at the city level you all are creating.
I mean, I certainly hope that within the design world and construction world that y'all live in, that we'll be able to point to Austin Energy Green Building and kind of using its, again, kind of voluntary, set the bar, require it for certain parts of the city through policy, and then have it ripple out. I'm hoping we can see something similar to that again as the city adopts its own purchasing standards that apply not only to like commoditized products, but also to their built environment, the buildings and the roads and the vehicles and things that they purchase.
I'm hoping so too, Jen.
We can dream, right?
I just know in Europe, they are making real progress in terms of, especially with interiors projects, using product. I think this actually might be a requirement now in a couple of countries, that the companies purchasing products from have a take back program, and that they are installing products that they can basically take to their next space. Because especially for interiors projects, the lifespan is only 10, 15 years or so based on the lease that they agree to. And so it's like especially important for thinking about how those materials can then go into their next space.
Yeah, I've actually been noticing that a lot around the pandemic and people either subleasing or letting their leases expire in terms of commercial real estate. I'm somewhat addicted to Facebook Marketplace, and I am astounded at the amount of office related furniture and equipment and things that get offloaded there all the time, and including like real estate and event staging companies. Like there's this whole second market now around kind of furnishings and interior design products that just keeps circulating, and I'm wondering if we will continue to see that as we are in this like massive shift as to how we work and live and what that space looks like and what are the demands of that space, and how our interests and our tastes are kind of accelerating. And we swap things out more quickly. Like how many layers of secondary markets will we have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Facebook Marketplace has been good. We need a commercial version of that.
So there kind of is one. It has not really taken off. It's called the Austin Materials Marketplace. And it
Yep.
started 6 years ago, I think.
Yep. We had him come speak about the program at a previous meeting.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with it and concepts like that, like there's also Move Out ATX, which is for predominantly around UT campus. It's a big effort to get people, renters, students that are renters as they're moving out, rather than just dump things at their apartment complex's dumpster or in the street. They actually have dropout sites so people can send it to thrift stores and other secondary markets, or through like refugee services and things like that. But the biggest challenge with kind of reuse options like that is storage and transportation. And so we really do need some kind of private sector innovation around that, where people will say, hey, I now have this unused lot or this unused building. I'm willing to be kind of the staging ground as materials and products shift hands. That's definitely a need.
Entrepreneur idea.
What's that?
Go ahead, Jen. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to see, I see Kristen's comment in the chat as well about kind of the pros and cons of home composting. That is very true. The city also does offer how to compost programs and backyard chicken keeping for compost support services as well. And they do touch on kind of some of the nitty gritty logistics that people need to be prepared for. So that is an option that's out there now. And that actually, Zach, if you'll switch to the next slide, kind of leads into the final goal in this section, which is really looking at product consumption at a household or individual level. So maybe you'll notice that the language in this goal is a little wordier, a little more open-ended. That is because we're trying, as Zach mentioned, there was a slide in there that showed how the climate equity plan essentially is the kind of the connector plan of all these individual department level plans across the city organization. And one of those is the city's zero waste plan, which is from 2011 and is also undergoing an update right now. And they got started maybe 6 months or so before the update of the climate equity plan started. And then because of COVID and other reasons, it got slowed down. And so now the climate equity plan is kind of ahead of the update to the zero waste plan. And we didn't want to, because the folks in the sustainability office and some of the volunteers that participated in our consumption advisory group, they're not the ones necessarily that are going to be implementing any zero waste related goals. So we wanted to make sure we were giving space to Austin Resource Recovery to really update and push the envelope on our kind of household level zero waste goals. So that is kind of to be added once they finish the update of their plan. Thought that it was going to be by June of this year. That hasn't happened yet. It's still coming together. So this goal will get updated so that those sync up. But that didn't stop us, even though there isn't a quantitative goal in here right now. We're still working under the city's current zero waste goal, which is to divert at least 90% of all trash that's created in Austin from area landfills by 2040. That will get accelerated. That may change shape. It may end up being a per capita waste reduction goal, but it will be more aggressive from what I've heard than it is now. So we worked on some specific strategies that could help us get towards a more aggressive zero waste goal that could help at the household level. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the food and product consumption section, the focus is really to continue shifting all of our incentives and programming upstream to avoid creating waste in the first place and reusing materials and products before getting to recycling and composting and other forms of end-of-life management. And so the city does have a lot of programmings that support reuse and repair and things like that. And so we wanted to take a look at making sure that those campaigns and marketing and outreach are kind of culturally and linguistically accessible. And so that's kind of the promoting reuse concept, is just taking a fresh look at those and making sure that we're reaching all parts of Austin in everybody's language that they're most comfortable with, and in a way that kind of resonates with them and what their life and their work activities look like. The second, around the eco hubs, I think this is probably the thing that people want to talk about the most related to consumption. The city has been talking about for several years this idea of creating kind of libraries of all things. So having some type of central place where people can come and rent and exchange products and even services potentially, and co-locating those with other commonly visited kind of sites, whether that's the library or the grocery store or community rec center. And that those eco hubs could also be a great place for the third bullet, which is around providing more education and training opportunities to really build up our local workforce that can support a circular economy, specifically around repair and reuse. So I don't know if you've seen the city's Fix-It clinics, but they actually have, the one this month I think is around repairing shoes. So they're going to have somebody that has some cobbling background that's going to teach you how to extend the life of your shoes, how to do minor repairs on soles and heels and things like that. And they've been doing that on a variety of topics. But one of the things they found, in particular in like the fashion industry, the city is also starting to become more of a fashion hub, is that they don't necessarily have people trained up in sustainable fashion concepts and in kind of repair and secondhand applications of that. So we're focusing on that in this plan as well. The fourth one is really around financial incentives. So one idea that was brought up is around sales tax holidays. At the state level, we have sales tax holidays in Memorial Day weekend for energy and water efficient appliances. We have back to school sales tax holidays right before school starts every year. So looking at whether that can be expanded to support kind of lower carbon products of different types, maybe additional rebates to look at. And then the last piece is around, again, the city's existing bulk pickup program. It's offered twice a year right now if you're a single family resident. And so the idea is just giving this a fresh look to make sure that the program is designed to make sure that as much is salvaged for repair or reuse or recycling as possible, while also providing job opportunities and even looking like that Move Out ATX program that I mentioned earlier around the UT campus, trying to divert things from the landfill upon move out every spring and summer, looking to expand that to other neighborhoods and different times of year as well. So that's kind of the focus of this last one at the household level, kind of beefing up what we have, making sure it's accessible, and focusing in on those eco hubs and some workforce development pieces that aren't fully there yet. So any questions on the residential consumption goal?
Oh, I have a quick question. Have you heard like what they're thinking about as far as the bulk pickup collection program? Like, are they going to try and instead of sort of hide it, announce where where the collection is? Well, I guess you can actually look it up, but so that people will actually go around and scavenge things more than they do?
Yeah, so there hasn't been a formal evaluation of it yet. I mean, I think they're getting feedback and considering it all the time. It's run out of the Austin Resource Recovery Department. But this is a concept that's proposed as part of this climate equity plan, which hasn't been formally adopted. So it's going to City Council on September 30th. But I do think that's a good idea. I mean, there are folks that kind of cruise around town and look for opportunities to pick things up and have trailers and things that they go and find things either for their own use or to repair and resell. So some of that happens now, but I'm not sure that it does happen on that kind of holistic citywide scale. And that knowledge of where it's happening could be one of those barriers.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds like we
last
need
slide
to.
is just our contact info. If y'all don't have it, Zach, if you want to flash that up. Yeah.
Oh, that's great, Jen. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys so much. This was really great to get a deeper dive into something that we don't necessarily talk about on a regular basis. I would love to hear from you all if you're able, so have you all think we can help within our industry and through the AIA. Whether it's creating some sort of group that does volunteer to pick up these items or whatever it is. So if you have ideas right off the bat, that'd be good too.
So I do know that the transportation and the storage for any of these pickup and reuse programs is always the limiting factor. So if that's like like a corporate volunteer day, of service days that y'all have, I'd be happy to put you in touch with probably Maddie Morgan in Austin Resource Recovery, who manages those types of programs.
That'd be great. Once it cools down.
Selective volunteering, I see.
Yeah. Zach, do you have any questions for this group or Jen?
No, I don't. Not right now. I will make sure though that we connect with you when the wheels start turning to the finish line here, so you guys can be in the loop.
Perfect. Yes, we've been waiting for this for a while.
Awesome.
I have a question, Kendall, for Jen and Zach. What, as an individual, do you think what are the things that we can do to facilitate these initiatives? Sorry, where's my face? Hi, I'm here. Had a piece of paper towel over my camera. And yeah, I'd like to know, because as an individual, you want to contribute, but you also understand that it's much more meaningful if a large group of people or a corporation, which I own a corporation, but it's quite tiny, if they commit to some of these initiatives. So what can we do on an individual level ourselves to mitigate some of these effects? And what are some talking points that we can tell other, like, not in my case, but our bosses or the people that own the firms that we work for? How can we persuade them?
So I think since Zach isn't going to jump right in there, I mean, I think it depends on what the topic is, right? I think one of the overwhelming things about spending a career in climate change and trying to slow the pace of climate change and adapt to its chaotic effects is that it's so all encompassing. It touches on every facet of our life. It affects every piece of the operation of a business. And so I think a lot of people can tune out because it just feels too big and I don't know where to start and I don't know where to care and I don't know how to connect it to something that I do care about. So, I mean, I guess my initial reaction to that is to like assess within your own organization, whether that's a business or another group that you're a part of or your own family, like what are you most passionate about? What are you going to stick with? What are you going to really dive into? And if that, for you is thinking about the environmental and social impact of all of the products that you bring into your world, then that's a great place to start. I mean, I think that, one thing that this is just at the individual level, not at the like whole systems change level, but like if I go to a restaurant and I get takeout, especially during the pandemic, and they're going to give it to me in a styrofoam container, I walk out the door. I say, no, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I'm not taking that. And I tell them why, right? And so you let them know that as a consumer, here's why you're making those decisions. I think internally, when I've tried to shift things within the organizations I've worked for, you have to do the business case, right? You have to run the numbers on it and you have to show that over some time period, there's a cost benefit and there's a reputational benefit to it. And then advocacy, right? I mean, I'm in policy, I study policy, I work in policy, and the reason that I do is because that's where I believe that systemic change happens. So I would love to work with any of you that want to speak up and advocate to the board in support of this plan, or even suggest other things that you're not seeing in the plan that you want to be in there and that you want to get funded. Like, let's work together to put together some talking points and get people to council and make our voices heard. Like, Zach can't do that as staff, but I'm not staff anymore, so I can. So let's do it.
I see Ashley put a link in the chat. One of her coworkers did a study on design considerations that support building management zero waste goals. So encourage you guys to check that out. And then I recently attended Green Business Summit portion of Green, and there was a session given by Carol Cohn on how our values are changing in what we consume and how we're consuming, and the power that we have as consumers to change things. And so I put a link in their website. There's a great article on talking about your organization's authentic purpose and what purpose means for different organizations. So I think that has a big pull. I think organizations are starting to realize they're not going to be able to retain staff. They're not going to be able to attract staff. They're not going to be able to sell their products. They're not going to be able to make money if they don't put out some sort of purpose behind what they're doing and what they're selling that has an impact on the world, whether it has to do with equity and the environment, whatever it be. So I think that has a big. I think we can vote with our dollar on a regular basis as individuals, but as a corporation, I think it's a big point to make. For bosses is that, well, if you don't get in line right now, you're gonna get behind really quickly. Any other questions from the group?
Well, I think that's really interesting, Kendall. And I will say that the different things that I do as a company owner, I feel very odd about talking about them with people, to promoting them on social media. I am scared of alienating potential clients. And I was talking to a marketing firm and they were like, just emphasize it's us, right? It's like, it's not that you, Kristen or Chris or whomever is doing this like special thing that you're composting, or, you have a recycling bin and, it's, talk about it in the sense of the greater community. And I thought that that was really meaningful. It helped me kind of get away from the modesty and just being like, I don't really want people to know, oh, hey, look at me. I'm this fantastic person. I hate that shit. And so, but they were like, just talk about like the community wants to know. And I was like, do they? And they said yes. And I'm curious what you guys think about that. But we're about to build a new office for ourselves. And I really want to go hard on a lot of different things, solar, rainwater harvesting. It's got a bunch of trees on it. It's going to be really awesome. We also have rescued a chicken that wandered down our street. And so that, but I'm also like, oh my, I wanted to make it dog friendly, but like, oh no, now we've got this chicken that we have to, but anyways, and then there's like, considerations, if I will have a compost heap, is that a health hazard? Am I going to get shut down by the city if I want to, have a compost heap on my commercial property? That's all, a liability concern. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't like talking about these sorts of things in general. I'm a pretty private person, as you can clearly tell. And, but, do you have any advice for a small business owner who, do you think it's valuable to let people know like what we're up to? And is there a way that we can do it without just sounding like we're bragging? Why is everybody laughing? Why is everybody
Not
smirking
laughing,
at
just
me?
love you.
Why are you smirking? Zach is like smirking at me right now.
You make
I mean,
people.
it's a hard question to answer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
just brainstorm with me for a second.
I mean, because you're a business, I mean, you need to be, aligning with customers and having people, demand your product. So, I mean, if the message aligns with what you're delivering to customers, then it'd be fantastic. It'll line right up. And if you don't talk about it and tell other people about it, like, I mean, that's okay too. I mean, I don't know. I'm also a person who, I don't need to brag to everybody, but I'm going to do everything that I can. And to, I'll tell people, and some people will get it and other people won't. And, I mean, that's part of the challenge of the cultural angle to this whole thing, is that so much of this is wrapped up in cultural norms and how people see and think about the world, which makes it challenging.
I have a couple thoughts. I don't own a business. I work in government. so take it for what it's worth. But if we look at what's happening with large companies right now, a lot of them are trying to brag about what they are doing and where they're standing up, whether it's on social equity issues or environmental issues. They're putting it out there. So obviously, like these large global brands that are trying to appeal to markets beyond Austin, think that it's important to their brand and to get it out there. I would say that we struggle I work at Austin Energy Green Building. We struggle with this a lot. Like, how do we put out the message of what we're doing without it sounding braggy? And the problem with it is if you don't do any of it, people fill in those gaps with misconceptions or wrong assumptions. They'll assume that you're not doing it if you don't tell them that you are. The number of people that have come to me to tell me about all the things that the city should be doing that we're not doing, and I'm like pointing them like, Well, actually, we are. Like, here's the links. I know we do a really poor job about telling anybody that we're doing these things, and it's not just us at Green Building, it's across the city. But yeah, that's what I run into, is a lot of folks, like, unless you tell them where you're at and what you're working on, you can't build those alliances either. So I think when you do start putting it out there, what you are doing, what you are working on, it also helps facilitate partnering with folks who also want to move the needle on that stuff. But anyway, I don't own a business, so it's very easy for me to sit over here and speculate.
I just would jump in. Thank you, Heidi. I would jump in again. I don't own the business, and like Plato, at this point in its history is not really considered a small business anymore. But we have been trying to ask ourselves these same questions and really kind of start externalizing a lot of the learning that we are doing internally, and try to share that as a resource with other people who may be going through those same things, right? So I posted in the chat like a link to a blog post. We're pursuing 3 different building certifications with our office renovation in San Antonio, which is going on right now. And we're like making steps toward publicizing all of the efforts that we're going through. But the first one we've already posted on our blog about how we're using solar energy offsets to achieve some of our zero carbon goals. And so in that case, yeah, we're talking about something we're doing on our own office, but we're publicizing it as a less of a like congratulations to us and more of a here's a strategy we found as a way to do this, like more of an educational tool for other people who are looking. So it's teaching people about like the process we went through and how we're doing our math and how we're, meeting those goals. So that's one, thing that I've experienced. And then another is just like speaking as like when you go through the process on your own project, now you have the perspective not only of the provider, but the client side of that equation. So that, makes you able to relate to what your clients are going through, what questions they have. And we've found that conferences are a good way to kind of also get some of that information out there, where we're sort of on a panel, as Heidi was saying, with like partners who are also doing this, to share like our experience, both from the someone asked us to do this and we figured it out side, but also we wanted to do this, and so we made ourselves the client, and this is the experience we had from the client perspective.
Yeah, I think the educational component is a key piece. Like, you're not bragging, you're creating an opportunity to educate folks.
I hope so. And I think that, because, we're an HVAC contractor, for those of you who don't know what I do, or the company that I own, we definitely try to educate folks about higher energy efficient systems and designs. And yeah, so I think that the educational aspect, and thank you guys so much. This has been really fantastic. It's so enriching for me. Thank you, Kendall. Thank you, Ashley. So yes, I think I'm not sure why I have some, we give scholarships. We have scholarships for folks. We sponsor other organizations. We don't talk about that either. We're just really private, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's a personality thing, I think. And so I am excited about this idea because, what the hell, why not let people know that you're trying, and it's a value that you hold very highly, whatever it is, even if it's something as simple and silly as, recycling, not silly, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be derogatory, just like recycling your cardboard or having a compost heap or even rescuing a chicken. Her name is Street L. I don't know, I didn't name her. And she just walked down our street one day and my husband was like, "Oh, is that a chicken?" And he's always wanted a chicken. Like we live, whatever. Anyways, so yeah, that's maybe we should be a little bit more open about who we are and not be so afraid of what people think of us. Ah. Ah.
I think it's a female thing too. I think we're just a little bit more humble. You know, in nature, and you know, not all of us are the same, but yeah. I think what you're doing is great, Kristen. I know everyone here does as well. Jenna, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Kristen, that I have worked in government most of my life, but I started my own small business about 8 months ago. And so it's been a huge shift, and I've learned a lot about myself, including around what you're just talking about. And I just wanted to add two things that came to mind for me. One is, like I said, I've been doing climate change work for almost 20 years. And so people know me for that. And I get a little jaded by all of the, especially like business oriented statements about what people are doing around climate change and racial justice and all this, that I just get cynical and I just think it's superficial. But I've had a couple incidents recently where close friends of mine have, you know, come to me like genuinely asking, like, we're screwed. What do I do? Like, how do I help? How do I make up for what I haven't been doing my whole life? And I feel like I initially kind of wrote them off, and I was just like, I don't want to talk about this. This is what I do all day, every day. It's depressing, whatever. But the more I talked to them, I was like, no, wait, like, I'm writing this off because I live this and breathe this all day. Not everybody does. So even if it seems like braggy for me to say what I would do, or if it feels like really basic, like, how could you not know that? Like, the world doesn't receive it. Most of the world doesn't receive it that way, right? Like, it's valuable, and people are looking for that. And especially from people and organizations that they trust, that goes a long way. So I just want to encourage that. And then the second piece, and then I'll be quiet because I know we're over, but when I started my business, I was actually really hesitant around it because I don't think of myself as a private sector person, and I had a lot of anxiety. And so for me, I felt like I had to put my mission and my values like front and center from the start. And so I very clearly like wrote out my values, which are reflective of me, not just my organization, because I am my organization right now. And so I'm challenging myself to stick to that and to hold true to that. And I'm, you know, people are getting to know me and my organization as a result of that. So I think it means a lot to have like values driven branding and marketing. So I say go for it.
Well, we'll all have your back, Kristen. Regardless, if you get any slack, we'll be right on there. All right, guys. Well, we're over. Thanks so much for joining us, Jen. I know Zach had to jump off, but so as a reminder, the recording will be posted of this on our website. And if you have any questions for Jen or Zach, just forward them to Ashley and I, and we'll forward that on to our speakers. And we look forward to seeing you all at our next meeting.
Yes, and happy long weekend, everyone. Thanks, Jen.
Yes, happy long weekend.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Hi, doggy. You're on mute. I can't hear you.